Can you imagine that? After being the first in my friend group to get engaged and boasting that my wedding would be the one they'd talk about for ages, he was telling me we'd have to postpone. I told him straight up that I didn't know where he was going to get the money from, but we were going through with the wedding as planned. No one was going to ruin my status in front of my friends. Over the next few weeks, Walter didn't go to work. He stayed home, surfing the internet and snacking on chips all day. It started to annoy me, and I decided to confront him. We had bills to pay, wedding expenses like the hall, my dress fittings, the cake, catering, and decor, and he was being nonchalant about everything. That's when I found out he had been suspended from work. It was the worst news I had ever received at that point. I didn't realize I was in for a real shock. Walter had been suspended from work, which meant the wedding plans had to be put on hold. Who was going to pay for everything? Definitely not me. He assured me he would find another job soon, but let me confess, I didn't see him the same way after that. In my opinion, I was better off than him. One phone call to my dad, and my wedding would be planned. But I didn't want to rely on my dad. This is why I wanted Walter to be in a solid financial position before we got married. To prevent situations like this, I had mentally stopped the wedding plans because I couldn't marry a man who could lose his job like that. All the respect I had for him vanished. I told him he had to get a job if he didn't want to lose me. That caused a huge argument between us. About 2 weeks later, Walter left the house again and returned to tell me he had been vindicated. They found out it wasn't him who had been taking money from the company. Well, if he had been the one taking the money, that would have made us a lot richer, and we could have run away to the Maldives. But Walter was a good guy, and the company had given him a work bonus to make up for the suspension. He was ecstatic, and I was happy he had his job back. But by then, I had already done something I regretted. I had started accepting friend requests from men who didn't know I was about to get married. It all began harmlessly when I reopened my Tinder account. I just wanted to see what was out there, and while scrolling through the profiles of attractive guys, I accidentally swiped right on one. We started talking, just harmless flirting and chatting. I knew I was about to get married, and I knew what I was doing wasn't right. But did I stop? No. Walter hadn't fully claimed me in front of my family and friends, and I was still a free woman in my mind. There was no official ring on my finger, so what harm could a little online flirting do? I wasn't planning on going on any dates with these guys. I just wanted to feel sexy and good about myself. There's this power that women feel when multiple men find us attractive. Let me not even get started on the attention. I told him my dad could still take care of me because he was older. I had been childish with my words. Trust me, I hadn't known the consequences of what I was saying at the time. Anyway, that seemed to anger Walter even more because he thought I wasn't serious about the marriage, which I was. Don't get me wrong, but I wasn't going to marry someone who wouldn't provide for me, as I had mentioned before. Imagine telling someone who's been pampered their whole life to get a job. What was I going to do? Actual work. No. Thank you. He was mad, and I was equally furious. So that put a stop to our wedding plans once again. I should have seen the signs from here. You had to be blind not to. But I guess I was, and my fiancé was too, because who would put up with my baggage up to this point? Walter stayed out of the house for almost a week, and I did something foolish again. I accepted a date from one of the men I had been flirting with on Tinder. I was frustrated and angry, and I just wanted to feel good about myself. Walter wasn't doing that for me anymore. There had been a time when he would take me out on dates. We'd go shopping, and he'd show me how much he cared in his own way. But I hadn't felt that in a while, so I went searching for it elsewhere. What I didn't expect was for my Tinder date to be as attractive as his pictures. I had thought his photos had been altered a bit to make him look like a Greek god, but the man I saw on the date looked exactly like his pictures. He was hot, and I was engaged, but he didn't know that. I enjoyed the date, and he asked to see me again. I went on another date with him while I was supposed to be planning my wedding. I knew what I was doing, of course, but I didn't know the repercussions. Walter wasn't taking care of me, so I wasn't going to give him the time of day either. That was what I thought in my head. After all, I was young and could pull any guy I liked. If Walter didn't want to come correct, then he was going to lose me. I didn't want that, but my ego was speaking for me, and it was clouding my logic and feelings. Obviously, Walter didn't know I was going on dates behind his back. At first, he wasn't even supposed to know, and maybe I could have gotten away with it. I wouldn't have been embarrassed and would have been living my dream life, married to him. But it didn't work out that way, funny enough. I always thought things would work out my way. That's the mentality I had while growing up. Anything I wanted, I got. Things were always smooth and easy for me. Men fell at my feet. People went out of their way to please me, and they did things just to stay in my good books. So, I went on the dates, since Walter didn't want to be of good use to my life. Label me a gold digger, but most of you do the same thing. Walter moved back in after a week and apologized, as he should. He told me he was sorry for making me feel like I had to provide for the wedding. I forgave him, of course. I even stopped going on the dates for a while as a sign of good faith, and our wedding planning resumed. But the issue of money and providing was still a big problem. Then my cousin had to get involved. Miss Goody Two-Shoes pretended to want to help me, but she was a snake and an even worse gold digger than I was. It was like she was sent straight from the depths of hell to ruin my life. And that's exactly what she did. One day, my cousin just showed up at my doorstep, claiming she wanted to help me plan for the wedding. She said she knew I didn't have any siblings or sisters to support me, so she decided to step in, as if I had begged her to come to my aid. I couldn't turn her away because she was literally on my doorstep. So, I let her come and witness how I'd been suffering trying to get money from Walter to fund my dream wedding. I didn't mind her seeing me at my lowest because in my mind, it wasn't me she was seeing. It was my fiancé. My pride was still intact. I wasn't the one with no money. Even though Walter had stopped providing for my upkeep, I still had my ways. Walter was finding it difficult to make ends meet, and it served him right for planning a wedding when he wasn't financially stable. I was even beginning to have second thoughts about it. To make matters worse, my cousin had to be supportive. I remember one instance when we were having dinner together, discussing the wedding. I told Walter we needed to complete the payment for the venue because the down payment wouldn't hold the place for much longer. Instead of supporting me, my cousin sided with Walter, suggesting we get a smaller venue. Can you believe that? She was trying to tell me what to do for my own wedding. I should have seen it earlier. The way her eyes never left Walter and how she was always coddling him. I should have known she had her sights set on him. If I had acted on it, maybe I wouldn't have lost my fiancé to her. Yes, I lost my fiancé to my sneaky, two-timing cousin. It was my fault, I agree, but he was mine. Wasn't she supposed to stay away? No, she was coming for what was mine. I just chose not to believe my fiancé could be snatched away from me. My cousin began supporting Walter in matters related to my wedding, and I began questioning why I let her into my home. It got to the point where I had to warn her to stop acting so concerned about my wedding. It was my dream wedding, and anything I wanted, I was going to get. If she wanted to talk about reducing the cost, she was free to go get married herself. What I told her that day drove a wedge between us, and she stopped commenting on wedding plans. She only helped me with errands and came along for my dress fittings. I thought I had pushed her away with my words, but she still stayed and wanted to help plan my wedding, not knowing she was trying to cover my fiancé behind my back. I learned that the hard way. If there's one thing I didn't know, it was that my future husband had a strong ego of his own. That led to our final battle, which ended our engagement, and my life changed for the worst. For a time, I stopped going on dates because I thought Walter was serious about me again. He gave me money to plan my wedding as I wanted and didn't complain about it. He'd buy me little keepsakes when he came home from work, and he'd ask if I needed anything. I was content, but karma, or perhaps my own choices, were about to catch up with me. So I allowed him to take me to a restaurant and feed me, and then it started again. I knew what I had done was wrong, but I didn't officially belong to my fiancé. He had asked me to marry him, but I hadn't said yes in front of God and an official, so there was no official commitment. I went on dates with Mr. Hot Guy behind my fiancé's back and accepted gifts from him. He didn't even push for sex, which was so surreal. He just wanted to give me everything I could ever want. Of course, I wasn't going to let go of such a good thing. My fiancé be damned. The consequences of that decision were huge. My fiancé didn't know about the dates, and to be honest, I didn't care if he found out. But he did, and it was through my cousin, who couldn't keep a secret. I had been on a shopping trip with my affair, and we ran into my cousin at a clothing store. There was no way to explain the situation, except that I was cheating. My affair had his hand on my waist, holding me close, and that's how my cousin saw us. Luckily, she didn't say anything in front of my date. She just shook her head and left. Even more luckily, she didn't tell my fiancé right away. I guess she wanted to confirm if it was true, but I didn't try to hide it. I wasn't embarrassed to be with another man, even though I wasn't engaged to him. We ran into my cousin again, and this time she told my fiancé. This happened to coincide with the time my fiancé was holding an office party, where employees could bring their significant others. My fiancé had told me about the party, and my affair had also invited me to an event, so I didn't know the drama that was about to unfold. My cousin reported me to my fiancé, and he was livid. He screamed at me, saying that after everything he had done for me, I was acting like I didn't have a ring on my finger or that I wasn't already dating someone. I was freely flirting with men and accepting gifts from them while I was about to be married. Apparently, he had seen the gifts I had been coming home with, but he had chosen to overlook it, thinking they were from my dad. That's when I found out that my fiancé had an ego of his own. He started listing all the things I had done, things he had chosen to ignore, because he loved me and thought we were meant to be. He had overlooked a lot, but now he wanted me to apologize for taking him for granted. Instead of apologizing, my ego flared up. I told him he should consider himself lucky that he managed to get a ring on my finger when I was still obviously a catch. Can you imagine that? I should have apologized to him, but instead, I made it all about me. I wasn't the one who had forced him to go on his knees and ask me to marry him. We exchanged more heated words, and my cousin had to excuse herself from the ugliness. Then I told my fiancé that I wasn't going to go to his office party with him. I had another date with someone who found me worthy. That seemed to anger him more, and he gave me a warning. He spelled it out in clear terms. If I left to go on my date, it would be over between us. I had thought he was joking, that he was saying it out of anger, but I left anyway. I went on the date with Mr. Hot Guy, and you wouldn't believe the drama I walked into. Mr. Hot Guy had said he wanted me to escort him to an event, but it turned out to be my fiancé's office party. The very same event. Imagine my surprise when the car pulled up to my fiancé's office building, and Mr. Hot Guy walked me in. The first person my eyes landed on was my fiancé. I thanked my lucky stars that no one from his workplace knew me, and I prayed my fiancé wouldn't cause a scene. But, of course, he didn't cause a scene in front of everyone. He just walked up to my date and told him that I was engaged. My date dropped my hand immediately, like I had caught a virus, and went on to argue with my fiancé. I moved closer to listen, hoping in some twisted way that they were arguing about me. But no, they weren't arguing about me. Apparently, Mr. Hot Guy was the one who had framed my fiancé for siphoning funds. He was the one who had made my fiancé lose his job the first time. How ironic. Anyway, I ran home that night before the party ended, hoping to beg for forgiveness from my fiancé. He got home after I had already fallen asleep, so I had to wait until the next morning to face him. My cousin had already left the house. At least she had the decency to do that. The next morning, I went on my knees and begged my fiancé for forgiveness. I told him I hadn't known what had come over me, that I would be the perfect wife and wouldn't go on dates anymore. My fiancé didn't say anything and didn't throw me out of the house. I thought fate had a sense of humor. He ruined me in front of all my friends. I stupidly continued with the wedding plans because I thought everything was back on track since he hadn't kicked me out or anything. But I didn't know I was the punchline of a joke. 2 months later, the day of the wedding came. I had even used my dad's money to pay for everything, and I had done my makeup and hair, putting on my wedding dress. Waiting for the wedding ceremony to begin that I waited and waited, but no one came to call me. Eventually, I went to the church by myself, and you won't believe what I saw. My fiancé was kissing my cousin at the altar. At my dream wedding, the one I had paid for with my own money. He had married my cousin and jilted me at the altar as revenge for ignoring his warning and going on a date with his rival at work. All my friends started laughing at me as I stood there in my wedding gown, while my fiancé married my cousin in front of me. What could possibly be worse than that? The following weeks after the wedding went by in a blur. I went to my fiancé's house to demand an explanation, only to find my clothes and bags outside with a note saying to move my things or risk losing them. I had to move back to my dad's house. But then a month later, my dad was arrested for owing a huge loan to a bank, and all his property was seized, including our house. They were looking to charge him in court, and I didn't know what to do. So I had to go and beg the person who had offered him the loan for more time to pay it back. It turned out that my ex-fiancé was the person behind the loan issue. He was the son of one of the bank's board members and had taken over. He didn't spare me any mercy with the loan. I had to use my own money to bail out my father and pay half of the loan. This is how my life ended up. I was paying off my father's debt because my ego was too big, and I had pushed away something that could have turned out good. I was supposed to be enjoying the luxuries of my ex-fiancé's riches, but instead, my cousin took my place, all because of my ego and foolish decisions. I hope those of you who are proud like me learn from my mistakes and don't follow the path I took. I'm still paying off the loan, and my ex-fiancé doesn't even pretend that we ever had a relationship. I tried begging my cousin to plead on my behalf, but she didn't help me. She probably thought I deserved it, and maybe I did,